Hello, everyone. This is Nanette Kennedy with Humanities Team and the Evolution Revolution. And this is our weekly book club group. And we're reading Conversations with God, Book 4, Awaken the Species, and by Neale Donald Walsch. And we are on chapter 13. And let our fun begin. Take it away, Linda.
Okay. All right. This is God speaking. You may want to memorize this, or at least put it in a place where you will see it often. 1. An awakened species sees the unity of all life and lives into it. Humans in an unawakened state often deny it or ignore it. 2. An awakened species tells the truth, always. Humans in an unawakened state too often lie to themselves as well as others. 3. An awakened species says one thing and will do what they say. Humans in an unawakened state often say one thing and do another. An awakened species, having seen and acknowledged that it is so, will always do what works. Humans in an unawakened state often do the opposite. An awakened species does not embrace a principle in its civilization that correlates with the concepts that humans refer to as justice and punishment. An awakened species does not embrace a principle in its civilization that correlates with the concept that humans refer to as insufficiency. An awakened species does not embrace a principle in its civilization that correlates with the concept that humans refer to as ownership. An awakened species shares everything with everyone all the time. Humans in an unawakened state often do not, only sharing with others in limited circumstances. 9. An awakened species creates a balance between technology and cosmology, between machines and nature. Humans in an unawakened state often do not do that. And 10. An awakened species would never, under any circumstances, terminate the current physical expression of another sentient being unless asked directly by that other being to do so. Humans in an unawakened state often kill other humans without that other human requesting them to do so. 11. An awakened species would never do anything that could potentially damage or harm the physical environment that supports the members of the species when they are physicalized. Humans in an unawakened state often do so. 12. An awakened species never poisons itself. Humans in an unawakened state often do so. 13. An awakened species never competes. Humans in an unawakened state are often in competition with each other. 14. An awakened species is clear that it needs nothing. Humans in an unawakened state often create need-based experience. 15. An awakened species experiences and expresses unconditional love for everyone. Humans in an unawakened state often cannot imagine even a deity who does this, much less to do it themselves. 16. An awakened species has harnessed the power of metaphysics. Humans in an unawakened state often largely ignore it. There are more differences, of course, but there are some of the chief characteristics of an awakened species. And the major differences between such a species and humanity in its present unawakened state. I'm going to read that paragraph again because somebody walked in the room and distracted me. I don't know what I did. There are more differences, of course, but those are some of the chief characteristics of an awakened species and the major differences between such a species and humanity in its present unawakened state. Gosh, Part of me feels like this list is an indictment of our whole species, our whole way of life. It is an indictment of a 3-year-old is it an indictment of a 3-year-old to observe that adults understand things she does not? Celebrate that you now know what you know. Celebrate that you clearly see the difference between your behaviors and behaviors that you may decide are more beneficial. Celebrate the growth of knowing this, even as you celebrate the early steps of every child. Thanks for reminding me. You keep making this point. We're really a very young species. Perhaps we should drive that point home in specific terms so it can become real in people's minds. A lot of folks like to think of humans as highly evolved. In fact, humanity has just emerged from its infancy on this planet. In their book, New World, New Mind, Robert Ornstein and Paul Ehrlich placed this in perspective in one mind-boggling paragraph. Quote, suppose Earth's history were charted on a single year's calendar, with midnight, January 1, representing the origin of the Earth, and midnight, December 31st, being the present moment. Then each day of Earth's year would represent 12 million years of actual history. On that scale, the first form of life, a simple bacterium, would arise sometime in February. More complex forms, however, came much later. The first fish appears around November 20th. The dinosaurs arrive around December 10th, and they disappear on Christmas Day. The first of our ancestors, recognizable as humans, would not show up until the afternoon of December 31st. Homo sapiens, our species, would emerge at around 11:45 p.m. And all of this has happened in recorded history would occur in the final minute of the year. That puts things in perspective beautifully, and it creates a context within which it could now be understood why, in human societies, most people deny much of what they see. They even deny their personal feelings, and eventually their own truth. But what's been said here now repeatedly about how early in our development we are as a species gives me great hope. As I said once before, I'm seeing wonderful, wonderful days ahead, both for us individually and for humanity collectively, as we mature and grow into our potential. This is the great opportunity that awaits you. It's just over the horizon. Yes, this is the perfect time for advancement. But do we have to wait? I think I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do we have to wait until the whole human race or the majority of our species awakens before any of us can experience living as a highly evolved being? Because it could be a long, long wait until most humans get to that place. You're right, you do already know the answer to this. Not only do you not have to wait, you are not supposed to wait. History is now watching to see who on earth will choose to self-select as being committed to modeling these behaviors, and by their words and actions join in the global movement to awaken their species. Who on earth will celebrate fully their true nature, and who will joyously co-create the wonderful days that lie ahead when they do so?
Thank you. Does anybody want to speak to any of the 16, what does he call that? I don't know if there is a title to those 16 things except for highly evolved beings.
Awakened species.
Well, the end of chapter 12, it says, I'm still trying, though, to get a sense more of more than just one or two ways that our daily experience here could change as a practical matter if we moved through everyday life in the way that these highly evolved beings have been encouraging us to do so. And God says, I can give you a list of them.
Well, does anybody want to speak to any of these, or something might have popped you on the head?
I'll just say that every single one of them sounds like today. Sounds like, I mean, it's like you got the people that are awake and see what's happening in the world, and then you've got everybody else that seems to be asleep thinking everything's lovely. We're making America great again. We are.
Yes. Oh boy, howdy.
Well, we have to have deep compassion. You know,
Yep.
that's the only thing you can have. It's I don't know if anybody saw Saturday Night Live last night, but it was hysterical. Like there's nothing you can do but laugh at this funny show.
That's true. Although go ahead.
No, I like the first one. An awakened species sees the unity of all life and lives into it. Humans in an unawakened state often deny it or ignore it. You know, we're conditioned very early to think that we're separate from everything, and we're not conditioned to believe in the state where you're just like this little sponge to see the oneness in everything. And I think where we are now in our evolution, our young people are starting to learn that, and they're starting to embody that. And on a personal level, I never, ever, ever give up. I never do.
Well, that's. I would expect nothing less coming from you, Christine. I'm not quite as awakened, but you constantly remind us that, and I don't think I give up either. I think I can get frustrated and.
Well, we all get frustrated. I get frustrated. I get angry. I've got a temper. I can be stubborn. I can be all those things. But then I have to have compassion, knowing that I'm still in my infancy.
The other,
You know, I don't see you, Nanette, as ever giving up. You know, you've been doing this gig, you know, getting up at 4:30 in the morning for what, 15 years or a long time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that somebody that gives up wouldn't be doing that.
that's absolutely true.
Thank you.
Diane, you were going to say something?
Well, I feel that the first one that you underline englobes everything. And the 15 other characteristics just shows us one by one how we don't live in unity in our daily life. And I think they're very useful to see the difference between highly evolved species and how I behave every day, even the days I think I am being awakened, and then will cut myself that not sharing everything and putting limits or being angry. Or this list is very useful, but it's also frustrating because there is a long way to go.
Well, Diane, you can always begin again, and you are one of the most kind and loving presences that I have known, and I'm very grateful that you're part of Humanity's team.
Thank you, Christine, but you know me from the digital distance.
Well, maybe at the Global Council meeting, you'll come back to Canada and I can give you a hug in person.
There you go.
This I would love. This I would love.
I have a question which seems extremely stupid, but it's important to me. If I could just ask it, I'd feel better. My understanding from book 3 is that we've already been down this path, that Atlantis and Lemuria and whatever, the old ancient civilizations are fact. They're not myth. and that humanity is about to make the same mistake for a second time. So when they're talking about us being toddlers, I find it hard to imagine. It looks more to me like we've grown up and committed suicide and then we're born again. I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, very good point. And the way I see from what you just said, there's a place in South Africa, it's a museum. And it's also, you go into these caves, and I won't be ever doing that again. Anyway, but on the floor in the museum part, there's these markings that say what time period, that I can't, I'm not a science gal, so I can't tell you what the names of those are. If I heard one, I go, yeah, like that. And it's done in a spiral, like a helix. And it tells you how many times humanity has gone extinct and then restarted. And it's very fascinating. And so to your comment, Shabana, I think that if that is the case, that we will go extinct again, it's a possibility, you know, and the next time we come around, we're going to be more awakened. Over.
Can I speak to that?
Oh, do please.
So Shabana, remember that fundamentally, there's no such thing as time. It's not an easy thing to wrap our heads around, but the fact of the matter is that ultimately there's, in the grand scheme of things, because all that we see in this physical world is actually an illusion, everything's happening at once. So those civilizations actually are in existence in some other slice of this realm that we're in. So I think that the ultimate lesson about time is to bring us back to this notion that it's the moment. It's just the moment that we're in that exists. There actually isn't anything other than the moment that we're in, because the past is gone, the future hasn't arrived yet. And that's the ultimate gift, is the moment that you're in. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's all of these other things, you know, the Atlantis and Lemuria and all of that, think of them as metaphors or allegories. Don't think of them in literal terms, because they exist only for the value that we get from them in the moment.
It's like the power of now, Eckhart Tolle, and you know,
right.
You use your breath. Like, you can't take a breath in the past, and you can't take a breath in the future. You can only breathe now. And in many cultures, you know, breath is life, right? And we are moving to a stage in our evolution where we will teach children the power of their breath to create.
Yes.
I'd like to, go ahead. Were you going to say something, Diane?
Yes, I will, but you started first. I want to listen to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, dear. And I desire to listen to you too. Of course, yeah, it's totally the now. There's no moment other than the now. It's only on this relative plane with our dualistic, you know, contextual field, right? That we have a concept of time that we're living in. I looked into Edgar Cayce's numerous readings. You know, Edgar Cayce, Virginia Beach, America's greatest prophet of some claim. But anyway, he's a wonderful, wonderful channel. Anyway, and I looked into a lot of his teachings about Atlantis and things expressed and things shared. And one direct thing in response to what you said, Shabana, is yes, the Atlantean culture had incredible development. Apparently, they were able to use crystals to power spacecraft and as power stations, and that sort of attunement for their power. But they were not an evolved species in terms of the love and the concepts of selfless, unconditional love and giving that we were just had read to us by Linda. So yeah, the Atlantean culture got to a point of self-destruction again through the battle between the children of oneness and goodness and those that followed the ways of greed and self-serving and not caring. So even though the Atlantean, Lemurian, whatever cultures were highly, highly advanced in that way, they did not have the evolution of love that would have saved them and kept them going. That's the way I understand that.
Thank you, Alton and Linda, both raised great points. Diane, what did you want to say?
I wanted to go back to the image of the toddler, understanding a little bit why Shabana feels that it does not fit with this human history, because we look at it and it's been often very violent and rough and close to extinction, which is not the life of a toddler in our eyes. But I think that when God says that, she is saying about in her eyes. So it is like when I would have looked at my son when he was 3 years old and writing all over the wall. And I would maybe scold him, but I would also laugh and see what I can do with his creativity. And so she's saying that she looks at us like that. And when the toddler looks at the wall and is scolded, he sees it as we look at this world history right now, as a mess. So I think that's what she's trying to tell us, that there's a long way to go and that we're just starting to understand and that we are loved. I think our metaphors have their limits, but I think that's why it is being used here.
Well, it's like we're out of balance between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And in order for everyone to thrive, we have to be in balance. Our system, our universal system has to be in balance. Otherwise, chaos appears.
Yep. And thank you, Christine, because that's spot on. And one of the things I was thinking about when I was telling you about the different periods of, I don't know if it's geologic history, I don't know. But when I was, we say that we're these imperfect beings, and I consider myself to be spiritually, definitely on a spiritual path. I'm definitely aware of when I might be stepping off of it. And I also know there's times where it's reaction rather than a planned, like when I started to say, and I won't do the caves again, had I known that I was going to be on 4 legs and touch elbows with the sides of this cave, I would have never, ever, ever, ever gone down, because that's not my cup of tea. And there was a woman in front of me who stopped when we were in this tunnel on her hands and knees, and I did something not very spiritual. I smacked her in her butt. And I said, keep moving, because I'm, I wasn't trying to act not spiritual. The fear of being in that closed-in place made me have that reaction. So if we take these things that happen in our lives where we may lose it, I think a lot of it comes from fear. Like if you were to spank your child when they ran out in the street and they nearly got hit by a car, it's a knee-jerk reaction. It's not an abusive thing. So we need to be easy on ourselves, as Christine has said many times, because we don't have it all figured out. If we did, we wouldn't be having this book group. All right, we'll see. We'll go to recess now.
Recess now.
I just have one last thing to say, because Linda killed two birds with one stone. I've been mystified by why my next door neighbor and her grandchildren took such pains to make their scrapbooks. I mean, the scrapbooks were works of art. And I was just scratching my head and saying, are you nuts? You could get, I mean, first of all, it's the breath in this moment now. So the past is over. The creativity is here and now.
Mm.
And I've just always looked at them because I've got stacks of pictures, never ever got around to even putting them in an album, much less cutting out paper and stickers and making a museum piece out of it, right?
Your thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It's not your thing to
To
do.
put it mildly,
Right.
yeah.
You know.
It ain't your thing.
Pardon? What? I can't hear.
No scrapbook here.
No scrapbook in your house?
No scrapbooks, no.
Everyone I've ever started has like 3 or 4 pages of scrapbook, and then the rest is blank.
I know. You never finish it. I
it's
have a lot
just-
of unfinished projects. A lot.
Well, it's too overwhelming for me, and I wouldn't care if somebody really is into it and is making memories for their grandchildren.
To each
That's-
his own.
Yeah, to each his own. Said Mrs. Brown as she kissed the cow.
Right, exactly.
So
Well, yeah.
anyway,
You're quick.
thank you. But anyway, what I was thinking is that, you know, I'm one of a bunch of kids, 8 kids. And my mom, I'm the only one who has a cover-to-cover baby book
Really?
because I was the oldest.
Oh, right.
And
First
then,
one.
you know, other kids came along and they had, you know, their footprint and their birth certificate and, you know, a couple pictures, and then their baby books are empty. So
They got tired after you.
yeah. Well, you realize how much work the first one was, and you move on.
Yep.
Most of us, not everybody. I was going to bring something up, and these have all been great points here. On 13, which is page 77 in my book, it says an awakened species never competes. Humans in an unawakened state are often in competition with each other. And I just wanted to hear from you. Is it okay to have football games and baseball games and soccer and rugby and dance competitions and singing competitions? You know, that Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, wherever you are, you've got talent. Is there something inherently wrong about that? I was just...
Yes. Absolutely.
Please go on.
Tell us, Linda. Tell us. What's wrong with it?
What's wrong about it is that we are creative beings. And so, and you know, I don't necessarily know that it's bad for us to play games, but competition, particularly in like business, is really a sleep behavior. The worry that there's not enough money, the worry that there's not enough of anything, is a completely asleep state of mind, because everything around us is sentient, and because everything around us is a function of divinity and contains divinity in it. The nature And everything around us wants us to succeed, wants to support us. But what happens is we're in a mindset of scarcity, in a mindset of lack. And so everything around us goes, oh, well, then they don't want that. They don't want our help because they have this mindset of they don't have enough. So I guess they don't have enough. And it sets up this inability for everything around us to support us because we're not allowing it to support us. And so, competition is really not where we want to be.
No, we're conditioned to believe that it's right, and it
Hello. Hello.
Hi, Angela.
And it's Anne. And I was just going to let Christine finish saying what she was saying.
Yes, finish it.
No, I was just, it isn't right. I had a teacher in grade 13, and she was an English teacher, and she had us all go home on the very first day of school and write about the benefits of competition. And then the next day we brought in what we'd written, and she said, anybody that thinks that competition is beneficial, that's a big mistake, because it's not. Nature doesn't compete with herself, right? And we're part of nature.
Mm-hmm. Anne?
Hi. I'm on the call a lot, and I don't say much unless I think I have something that I want to contribute. And this one kind of sparked my interest because I disagree from the standpoint of a matter-of-fact statement, whether something's right or wrong or good or bad. I think it's all how it's used or the way that it's put out there. In competition, as I see it, the person you're competing against is always yourself. It's not the next guy. You're competing against what you did before and wanting to be better, just like we want to be better people. As far as being part of the dance world for so long, what happens in situations like this, if you really look in the competition of so you think you can dance or something, they make friends and families that sometimes go with them through life. If you watch, it's not about who makes it. They're not competing against each other. They're actually working for each other, and they're appreciating what each of them can accomplish. At the same time, everybody wants, of course, to be the winner and get the prize. But there's a whole network of something else that's happening that's very healthy in there. Being around like peers, just the sharing of experience, without that sense of that would be lost. It wouldn't be there as an opportunity. So I think it goes down to the way you hold something or the way that you regard something or how you use something. I'm not sure if because there's good in everything.
That's an excellent point, Anne. That's a very good point, because if
the difference is whether we're open-minded or closed-minded. When you get a closed-minded set, then everything is right or wrong, good or bad, this or that, and we're back in the same parallel that paralyzes us in the first place. Because it's like you're over there and I'm over here, or we're on the call together.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, it's like it's all a construct. How we're constructing the construct.
No, that's a really good point, because having been on a circuit with my youngest son, who is a singer, all those kids that perform together when they do their recitals, they're all there in support of one another. And boy, if somebody makes a mistake, and it's that moment of embarrassment that you can feel in your own self, everybody's very compassionate with that person. So I think there's what you're saying, Anne, is that there's an upside to being in competition, as long as we don't take it to that place and we don't need to label it as good or bad. But when the competition becomes for, I want your oil. When
you're competing against somebody in lieu of their well-being, for your well-being, so to speak, that's different competition than competing against yourself, which most competition is, because the only person you can compete against ever is yourself, because you can't do better than where you are. You can improve, but you understand what I'm saying? It doesn't matter if the next guy is better than you. If you're not at that level, you're not at that level. Then you have to work. Then I don't know if that,
Yep, that makes
we're really
sense.
just always competing against ourselves. The same way I see that in relationships right now. I'm having difficulty with the situation, and it's like, but if I think it's just about what that person's doing to me or something, there's something wrong with that, because what it really boils down to is what someone's doing says more to say about them than it does to say about me, and what I do says more about me.
Can I give an example of this?
Oh,
Please
sure.
do.
Yeah. I went to a Quaker religion on both sides of my family. And that's where my parents met, at a Quaker school in college, and they got married down there. But Quakers are raised with the theory, and I went to a boarding school in Pennsylvania, which is the George School, and we had no competition. It's called the Friends League. So I participated in sports and ran and stuff like that. So that was always our alma mater. You don't really compete, and it doesn't matter. So they were all just called, the League of all the schools in the area, all the Friends, all the Quaker schools. So we were raised not to compete against somebody. That wasn't important. It was important of us getting together as students and stuff. And it was always non-competitive. We didn't do that. We didn't really, sometimes they didn't keep score, because it doesn't matter. We're both just there. And of course they kept score because they have to have the trophies, and we all had those things. And the singing group that I was just in too, Rock Voices. Well, I'm still in it, but I'm just out of the season. Where I, was singing with them. There was no rehearsal. There was no, what do you call it for that? Admittance. Everybody was admitted, whether you could sing or whether you could read music. It didn't matter. He'd accept anybody. It didn't matter. Just, you give him the fee, of course, to sing for the semester, for the term, the group. But, that was another thing that Tony, the director, just accepts everyone. There's no auditions. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. There's no auditions. Anybody can sing. And you don't have to learn music. And it was a beautiful experience for me. I did it two times, 2 seasons, and it was really beautiful. And so those are 2 examples of non-competing things. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
I love the Quakers for that, Kirsten. And we have a choir like that here in Victoria. It's called the Getting Higher Choir. And there's nobody, and
Really?
Sometimes there's 200 people in the choir, and sometimes there's, less than 100. But there is absolutely anybody that wants to come and sing.
It doesn't matter anything. He said
I have 2.
Well, you don't even know how to sing. He said doesn't matter. Just come and join us Monday night.
Well, I have 2 comments here. The first comment is about special ed. Special ed, everybody gets a medal just for participating.
Yeah.
So everybody's a winner. Win-win situation.
That's what they did.
But wait, here's what came to mind to me. Here's what came to mind to me, though. Wait a second. Here's what came to mind to me growing up in New York City. I love Broadway and I love the theater. Would I want to pay all that money to go to a Broadway show that wasn't selected at who got what parts?
Right.
And I was, you know what I mean? And so I went there and paid all this money, and it's like, I want the best. I want somebody who has those skills, who has that talent, look at the child prodigies. The thing about the competition shows is the kids that really have talent, like these 9-year-olds, show up, and they're prodigies. They've been given this voice of a saint, so to speak. But it's like they don't have to. There's opportunities to say, okay, there's opportunities for them to be directed and have a way to use that, or to help them to use that because of what these things are creating. Where in my day and age, there wasn't any opportunities like that.
Mm-hmm.
You just struggled, and I don't know. So there's good in everything, is what I'm saying, but it's how you use it.
Yeah, it's true.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
A quick point, perhaps. In business, there's no conscience. The level of competition that's gotten there is literally cutthroat, and we're watching Mother Nature bleeding all over the place as a result of the concept of competition gone way too far. Without considering the benefit of everyone. the idea of doing your personal best is absolutely wonderful. I delight in that. And yet that can be taken to imbalance also. I knew a woman that, in an academic sense, was so concerned about her continual performance that if she would get, I once accidentally, teasing, got a higher mark on a test than hers, and here we get in the whole marking thing. She was really upset, even though we were really, really good friends. So she had taken personal best to a level of imbalance, and it wasn't healthy. So yeah, there's a few other thoughts to add to the wonderful thoughts everyone else has shared.
Well, there's one other thing. We talk about nature. What about survival of the fittest?
That concept has been proven to be erroneous.
Thank you,
Okay.
Christine.
I've heard that.
Yeah. I didn't hear. That's good.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I don't know. Okay.
I don't think that we're understanding the concept that's in the book.
Compete. Nature surrenders to what is. You study the veins in your hand and look at a leaf, and we're all one.
We're also all divinity. Why would divinity compete with itself?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree.
And I want to go back to something Linda said a few minutes ago, and thank you everybody for all of you contributing, because it makes it a lot more fun and gets the wheels turning. I can't remember. It's Miracle on 32nd Street, I think, is the movie.
Yeah.
34th.
34th Street. I knew it was in the 30s.
You got to know what street Macy's is on.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to talk about, is that scene in the movie where the person that was working at Macy's, I think it was the Santa Claus, and maybe somebody else, said, you can get this very same thing down the street for a cheaper price. And it was found out by the boss. And at first that person was in a lot of trouble, but they saw their business increase because they felt like there was enough. And so they sent people to other stores when they lost the sale that they could have made themselves. And that's what you reminded me of, Linda, when you were talking about that feeling of there's not enough, or, you did a great job saying it, but it did make me think of that movie. Over.
I want to touch on something before we're done, because we're getting close to the end of the hour.
Yep.
So after the list, then Neil reads that excerpt from that book, and God says, this put things into perspective beautifully. It also creates a context within which it can now be understood why in human societies most people deny much of what they see. They even deny their personal feelings and eventually their own truth. So this gets to what I believe is the absolute crux of the process of awakening. And we touched on it also earlier when we were talking about the breath.
Right.
Our bodies are the vessel within which our spirit resides. And I think I've shared this in the past in this circle, that from my understanding, the breath actually is what the spirit lives in. And so when we die, rather than it being a failure of our heart or a failure of our lungs, it's actually a failure of our breath. Our breath leaves us, and our spirit and soul leaves us on that last breath and goes back to source. And the physical form is left inert. And so it's really, so the body is a collection of cells. Each cell has your complete cellular memory. It has everything. It has all each cell has the memory of all your other lives. It has some memories of why you're here. And so this body made up of all these cells also is, in and of itself, has its own wiring. And so there's basically, the body itself is wired for three things: fight, flight, and freeze.
Right.
That's how the body itself is working, that it's being animated by the spirit through our breath. But the cells themselves, as a combination which make the vessel, are in charge of the survival of the vessel. And so when attacked, or when frightened, or when hurt, the cells themselves have a wired response. And so the cells themselves are going to cause the body to do one of those three things: freeze, fight, or flee.
Or
And
heal.
Okay, so no, the wiring of the actual cells of the body have those three responses. Now, this is where awakening comes in. As we awaken to our spirit, as we awaken to what our breath is, where our spirit is, bringing our breath down into our root chakra, connecting back up all of those energy centers, becoming whole again in a spiritual sense, as we awaken, then there are three new responses that are emerging: compassion, forgiveness, and love. And this process that we're going through right now as a species on this planet is, there are those of us who are awakening to this change that's happening, this shift that's required. And so this is key. This issue of not acknowledging our feelings, that's how we've been raised. We've been raised since little children to be quiet, to don't cry, get over it, stuff your feelings down, don't do this, don't do that. And we've not learned as species, as we've been growing up, it's not common to go into our feelings. We're not encouraged to allow our feelings, to acknowledge our feelings. And so because of that, we don't know who we are. In general, I don't mean us specifically on this call, but I mean in general, people don't know who they are, because when something feels uncomfortable, rather than going into it, they go away from it. They push it down, they push it away, they shut it out. And that's how we've come to have this society that we have right now, where people yell at each other and throw things and are rude and short with each other and ill-tempered, because we haven't processed our feelings. And that's the actual requirement for ultimate awakening. You cannot be an awakened being if you have not learned what triggers you and processed and learned how to let that go and to work through it. And I feel like that's like this ultimate integration that's happening. I don't believe that we can move into a place of forgiveness, compassion, love, if when something happens to us, we feel victimized or angry or whatever. And so this is the ultimate P in the mattress to me.
I want to throw something out in my own process. What I've been trying to do in context with this is, what if I didn't try defending my point of view, defending, fighting, or negotiating? I'm trying to see how I can be more loving. And, is there a way I can stop fighting everyone and everything and just be anyway? And I'm working on that, and it's a very difficult exercise because I really noticed that is my reactional behavior is defense, negotiating, bargaining, or fighting. But in order to be very loving, I find that those things, if I can not engage in those three things, there's a different precedence at stake.
Well, and thank you for working on yourself. That's our ultimate job, is to be married to the young one and the ancient one are the same, and to be married to that. About 10 years ago, I went through this 10-week program. It's called The Presence Process, and it's by Michael Brown. And it was very good for helping me stay in the moment. And that for each week you practice one thing. The first week it's this moment matters. The second week it's I recognize my reflections and projections. The third week is I choose to respond with unconditional self-love and unconditional self-kindness.
No, but that's not what I was talking about, though. I was talking about an awakened state. My feeling from what he said is that in an awakened state, we don't need to fight anyone or anything. And
Right.
we were talking about competition, and again, that's fighting. So that I was tying it into what we were talking about.
I know,
So anyway.
I know you were, and I think that you have to work on yourself. We all do. That's our purpose. That's our purpose for being, is to work on ourselves, to wake up. And the presence process was a process to wake up.
Okay.
Conversations with God says that true feelings are the language of the soul. So yes, we have to get in touch with our feelings. I loved what you were saying there. And wow, that's my contribution. Well, I just realized that. Thank you very much.
Now, I really thank everybody for their contributions today. And I hate it when that happens. I had a profound thought, and it just...
Senior moment.
Yes, it's Twitter. But I know what I was going to do. I was going to read a comment from Sarah. Sarah says, those schools who give awards to children for their unique contribution, their individual specialness, rather than for being better than each other, have a good approach. And she says, I love the way Kirsten has described it. And I think that's the best way to do things, is if you've got the class clown, that one gets the award for being funny. And if the other one is, I don't know, whatever they're good at, but everybody gets praise for what they are good at.
Yep.
And sometimes
that's how
be
nurtured there in that school, because they did that. They nurtured I had a lot of disabilities, and they nurtured that, and I wasn't ever put down or anything. We didn't put anybody down. There was no competitions. We just all, loved each other. I was the hugger. I hugged everybody.
Yeah, so you would have been the one that got the best hugging award,
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's really important, so that no kid feels like they're losing.
Right, exactly.
Everybody's being appreciated for what they are.
And we all had a big dinner at the end of it. The Friends League all had a big dinner, and it was like a celebration. It didn't matter who was first, second, didn't matter. None of that mattered. It was great.
Yep. Well, I thank you, everybody. Once again, a great call.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, everyone.
love you all, and love our conversations, and love our group. And Alton, I'm very glad to see that you were able to get on.
Yeah. We missed you last week.
Yeah, we missed you last week. So.
I was there in spirit, always am.
All right.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So bye everybody, and
Love you.
I always
talk to you
think-
later.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye.
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 Bye.